Fresh protests erupted in Hampshire last night after an alleged secret plot to move asylum seekers into brand new flats was revealed. The local authority said it had not been initially consulted on plans to use £250,000 high street apartments to house migrants after communication difficulties with Clear Springs, a procurement company employed by the Home Office for the project. Well, former Home Secretary Suella Braverman labelled the proposals utterly inappropriate and said she was very proud of the over 1,000 locals who took to the streets to protest peacefully yesterday evening. A Home Office consultation ends on Friday, after which it will decide whether to approve the proposed accommodation. Well, joining me now to discuss this is leader of Waterloo Conservatives, Councillor Gwen Robinson. Councillor Gwen, thank you very much for joining me. Give us a little bit of a taste as to what it's taken to get over 1,000 people to peacefully protest what many will see as the establishment stepping in on the toes of local people.
I think first and foremost, it was actually just letting people know what was planned. I mean, I'm still asking the question, at what point would residents have been told if, you know, that this was going to happen, if Suella and I hadn't raised public awareness of it? And to be honest, Alex, channels such as yours, GB News, you know, keep people really up to speed with what's going on across the country. And I think people thought, no, you know, the organiser put it together, assured me it would be peaceful, and it was. And people decided to come out in their droves and really make their voices heard.
Yes, Gwen, this is an issue we're seeing, of course, up and down the country here. What on earth were the government thinking, not even consulting with the local council before making this decision? Is there a disconnect, a massive disconnect between local government and national government?
Well, apparently the person that they contacted, Clear Springs contacted, had left the council. So I asked, well, surely if he'd left, then his email would have been shut down and it would have bounced back to Clear Springs. So, you know, maybe that question needs to be asked of Clear Springs. Did it bounce back, or did they just not get a response? They then handed it over to the Home Office for adjudication, and then the Home Office decided, well, obviously the council have not responded. I have to say, I think the Home Office also have to hold their hands up and say that they should not have been satisfied with that response from Clear Springs. I mean,
it's just one message, isn't it, Gwen? It's one message.
Yeah.
I mean, you think of all the people they could have contacted, every councillor, the local MP, and they still didn't bother to try again. It almost felt like they thought, oh, job done, we can just go ahead with this without telling anybody. That's the impression I get, Gwen.
And that is exactly what they did. And apparently, so I was told by the Home Office, that if the number is below 100, they don't have to contact the MP. Now, to my mind, whether it's 10 or 100, the MP, in our case it's Suella Braverman, should have been contacted and notified that this was being planned in her constituency. So, you know, yes, there's been obviously errors made, but again, I felt that it was right with Suella that, you know, we let the residents know what was intended for our high street.
Yes, absolutely, Gwen. And we're seeing the pictures there of the over 1,000 people that showed up to protest there very peacefully, very, very peaceful, which is always good to see. What do you think this protest will have any impact on the government's decision? Because at the end of the day, the government are going to have to look at other towns now where these migrants maybe move somewhere else. You know, are we just moving the problem around, Gwen?
Well, I have been given the chance as a ward councillor to add to the consultation. I've spent a long time and I put my deputation together and I put it forward. And I have acknowledged that there is pressure, but I've also said that surely the priority should be choosing locations that are more suitable. You know, going in, you know, dropping 35 people into the middle of Waterlooville town centre, that is not a suitable location. You know, these people, they'll come, you know, they're not able to work because they don't have the right to work or anything like that. what are these people going to do? They are going to hang around the town centre, and I can only see that will have an incredibly negative impact on all the hard work that the regeneration team at Havant Borough Council have put into the town centre. It was in decline, and then in 23 we decided to get some investment, and then we had a private company come in as well. So it is on the up. I can only see that this is going to drag it back down again.
Yes, and Gwen, of course, Waterlooville won't be the only town across the country experiencing this at the moment. It's disgraceful that £250,000 flats, brand new flats, are being given away to people who've barely been in the country, let alone the fact that the government weren't communicating very well with you, at least. What would you like to see change, at least for those other parts of the country that might be experiencing similar things? What does the government need to do if they're at least going to get something sorted on this very, very critical issue?
Right, this issue is going to go on for years. We know that. We've been told that. We know that. Now, you could say that isn't it about time that all parties work together on this? Because this was an issue, for the Conservative government. It's an issue now. It will be an issue in 29 for whoever comes in then. So, but unfortunately, because all the parties have a very different view on how this should be handled. So, for example, the Conservatives had their Rwanda scheme. They believe that we do need to deport them. And talking to a lot of people, they actually agree with that. I think Reform believe the same. But of course, then you've got the Labour and the Lib Dems, probably Greens, I don't know, not quite so much on them. Their thing is, well, let's smash the gangs. Well, we can't smash drug gangs. So, and we've been trying that for decades, haven't we?
Yeah.
So how on earth are we going to, smash these gangs? They're organised, they're organised gangs. As one falls, another one will pop up.
Exactly. So, it's a billion dollar industry, Gwen. They're just going to keep on. That's my opinion. They're just going to keep on coming.
Yes, they will.
What would you like to see improve about the way that government communicate with councils on this? Because, in my opinion, one of the biggest problems we've had here is that you lot didn't even know about it. You weren't even informed, or at least the attempts to communicate with you were abysmal.
They really were. They really were bad. I mean, Clear Springs, I'm told, one of their tricks is, they say they've tried to make contact. Now, they tried to make contact with somebody in procurement. Now, I know their role is to procure for the Home Office. So I found that a little bit lame. We'll go to procurement. I mean, I do agree with our chief exec that on something as important as this, they should have actually contacted the chief exec or the executive head for housing. Now, those two people one of those should have been contacted. So I think the Home Office need to seriously look at Clear Springs, maybe Serco, and I know there's another group that they use. So I think they need to take some responsibility here. Now, I think you asked me a moment ago, Alex, do I feel that, the good people of Waterlooville in their peaceful protest, it's going to make any difference? I'm not that confident, because I know that June, July and August are the 3 months when there's a huge increase in the number of migrants coming across. I think it's 900, was it yesterday? Now,
yes.
Those people have got to go somewhere. So for that reason, even though I have argued that location is not suitable, I wouldn't.
You're not hopeful. Gwen, I understand. I think you are probably somebody that is a feeling that is shared across the country. At least local politicians don't feel like the government will listen to them, even if they hold thousands of peaceful protests. But there we go. Councillor Gwen Robinson, their leader of Waterloo Conservatives, thank you very much for joining me. And just off the back, on the same story here, I'm now joined by Director of Sanctuary Foundation, Krish Kandia. Krish, I hope I haven't butchered your last name. I do apologise if I have. Krish, so look... of course, you can see there is a lot of unrest in the country. Most of it has been peaceful so far, but we're looking at Epping, Waterlooville, other parts of Britain where it's like a powder keg waiting to explode because local people feel hard done by. £250,000 brand new flats given away to people who've just landed when there's housing lists for sometimes in some places decades long. Can you understand? Do you agree that people are unhappy with what's going on here?
Hi, Alex. Yeah, I think I understand that people are upset. and they're upset that there aren't enough houses. They're upset that there's a cost of living crisis. And those are really understandable concerns. But it feels like they're taking their anger out on a very vulnerable group of people. These are people that have fled war and terror. And now they've got a crowd of 1,000 people protesting outside the place that they're supposed to be coming to live. Or if you're in Epping, outside the hotel that you're in.
Yes, I totally appreciate that. The vast majority of people that come here, of course, aren't criminals, but many people feel like they can't get their voices heard. They voted election after election, decade after decade, to lower net migration. That's one issue alone. Nobody ever voted for this crisis to continue with illegal migration, and they're asking the government to take action. We've seen that Smash the Gangs clearly isn't working, Krish. We have record numbers coming over the channel now. And I think people feel, well, what else can I do other than protest at the place I know the government have assigned to this building? I mean, what advice would you give people if they do want to protest this in that case?
Go and visit Parliament. There are lots of places you can walk into the lobby in Parliament and demand to speak to your MP on most days of the week. So there are definitely better ways to protest. I mean, I think it's all about the story that we tell. People have been told that the reason that there isn't enough housing, or the reason that there's a cost of living crisis, or the reason there's a queue at the NHS is because of all these immigrants. Well, that's just not true. Many of us made room in our homes for immigrants from Ukraine. I've got my little Ukraine badge on because we know what it's like to step up and offer help to people in need. Being British, I can see on your pictures, you've got some beautiful St. George's cross, a beautiful flag. I was wrapped in a St. George's flag this week when we were cheering on the Lionesses. And the Lionesses, guess what? Full of immigrants that come and make a contribution to our society. We don't need to fear immigrants. We need to embrace them.
But I think when we separate the issue here onto...
that the problems is all due to immigration. I think that's really unhelpful.
But Chris, when we look at the illegal migration problem, we look at this problem that has just gone on and on and on, is getting worse and worse, and government after government has told us they're going to solve it. And now what's happening is, in some cases, there are dangerous people going into those local areas. Of course, I believe they should protest in their local areas because it's a local issue. What the left do is they organise national protests, they ship and bus people around the country and then block Parliament and places like that. And those are completely ineffective because politicians don't listen. But when it happens in your hometown, these aren't organised right-wingers. These are just local people who've had enough and said, not in my turf. And so I disagree with your sentiment on where they should protest. But when we talk about this being a problem, it's the biggest crisis facing this country now. It's the top issue on every part in the country. But regardless of whether it's being made that, it's what people feel. And I think the sentiment here, Krish, is that people at home just don't feel like anybody is listening to them. When the Prime Minister sometimes gets up on his podium, he's called them far right before for simply having an opinion on illegal migration. And I think that perhaps the rhetoric has boiled over on people. Do we hold politicians responsible for this?
Look, I think there's a lot of people that are to blame for this, but illegal migration, as you call it, or asylum seeking, as I call it, is just 4% of net migration. So we're focusing all our attention on a very small group of people, and we're blaming them for all the problems in our society. And that's why you get 1,000 people out on the street. Look, I want to solve the problems that they actually have, which is let's get better housing, let's get jobs going, don't blame the immigrants. We can be a nation of neighbours. Look, one of my favourite and most British characters is Paddington Bear. Paddington Bear is an unaccompanied asylum-seeking bear, and yet he represents something beautiful about our nation. But instead, we're whipping people up to blame immigrants for all of our problems. And I think that is the powder keg. That's really unhelpful.
Yeah, Krish, thank you for joining me, by the way. I do feel that when we look at the amount of people, we've got record numbers today, 700,000 people we found out the other year, it came in 22, 23. Huge numbers of people entering the country. Of course, it's putting pressure on every single service, from the NHS to doctors, to schools, to homes. How on earth can this country survive when that is happening year after year? Anyway, moving on. The government has said the government is reducing expensive hotel use as part of a complete overhaul of the asylum system, from over 400 asylum hotels open in the summer 2023, costing almost 9 million a day. There are now less than 210 of them, and we want them all closed by the end of this Parliament. We will continue to work closely with the police and community partners across the country and discuss any concerns they have. Of course, the security of the local communities within which hotels are located will always be our first priority.